Right, so good morning to everyone. So let's begin today's lecture. Okay. Right. So in the last lecture, right, just to quickly recap, we were looking at how to obtain a normal form for a context-free grammar. So so a context-free grammar in general, right, doesn't. So as we know, right, so context-free grammar consists of a list of or a set of production rules, right, and it doesn't constrain the body of the production rules, right, which is the right-hand side of the production rules. However, so we want to basically constrain this right-hand side, right? So that's what a normal form does. And some of the applications of normal forms are that we'll be able to reason about the properties of context-free languages more easily, right? Uh, if we have a more restricted form of context-free grammar, right? And we can do this uh, without restricting the class of languages which is accepted, right? So which means that if you consider a context-free grammar with any arbitrary form of production rule, or you consider a context-free grammar. So for every such context-free grammar with any arbitrary body of production rules, there exists a context-free grammar uh, which accepts the same language, right, or which corresponds to the same language, whose language is the same, and its body is restricted, right, to have a specific form. So uh, so that's the motivation behind looking at normal forms. Right? So we will look at one normal form, which is the Chomsky normal form. So we have been building up towards that from the last lecture, and today we will actually see, right, what is the Chomsky normal form, right? So towards this process, right, of how to convert an arbitrary CFG to a CFG in its Chomsky normal form, we saw that there are multiple steps that are involved, right? So in particular, right? So the first thing that you do is to clean up the grammar, right? Which means to get rid of non-terminals which don't derive anything. So which don't derive a terminal string. So if you have a non-terminal which doesn't derive a terminal string, then that can be safely removed from the grammar because such a non-terminal will never be involved in any derivation of a terminal string. Right? So you can remove a non-terminal which doesn't derive a terminal string, and also you can also remove all the production rules, right, which involve that particular non-terminal, right, either in the head or in the body. So the second step is to get rid of all the non-terminals which are not reachable from the start symbol, right, from the start non-terminal. So the reason is that again, uh, the non-terminals which are not reachable from the start symbol will never be involved in any production or in the derivation of a string which is present in the language of the grammar. So that's why you can safely remove all of these unreachable non-terminals. So you can remove these non-terminals. You can also remove production rules which involve these non-terminals either in the head or in the body. Right? And the third step, which we were just finishing up right in the last lecture, was to get rid of epsilon productions. So these are productions where the body of the production is just epsilon, right? So, for example, in this grammar, right, so there are three such productions where the body of the production is just epsilon. Right? So we can get rid of this epsilon productions as well, right? And the way to do that is so we can't just remove them, right? So if you just remove the epsilon productions, then you won't be then the language that you will get, right, will not be the same as the language of the original grammar, right? So we need to add some other productions to make sure that the derivations which involve those epsilon productions, right, the derivation of a non-null terminal string which involve those epsilon productions still goes through, right? So to ensure that we add other production rules, right? And the formula, right, or the sort of key idea, right, of adding this new production is that if you have if you have a production of the form a derives x1 up to xn, right, then you first find out what are all the non-terminals which are present in the body of this production, which are nullable, right? Which means which can turn into an epsilon string. Right? So, and for each such subset of this nullable x, you basically introduce a new production, right, where all of those nullable x's are already converted to null, right, which means they are already eliminated. So they are basically eliminated from the body in advance. So in this example, right, since A, B, and C are all the three are nullable, right, because they can produce epsilon productions, or they are involved in epsilon productions. So that's why in this rule, S derives A, B, C, right? We basically take every subset, right, and we convert it to epsilon in advance, right, which means we remove those particular non-terminals, right? So S generates ABC is the original production, but we consider every subset, right, and we remove it, right? So for example, C is removed here, A is removed here, B is removed here, and so on, right? And similarly, in this production, A generates AA. We again remove A as well, the capital A, which is the non-terminal, in order to get this production. Right? So the reason that we are doing this, right, is because we want to make sure that the derivation of any non-null string, right, or the derivation of any non-null string, if it involves an epsilon production, right, will still go through even after we remove the epsilon productions. Right? So that's what we will show today, right? That removing this, that's the first thing that we'll show today, which is that removing this epsilon productions and adding these new productions does not change the language of the grammar, right? Except that it removes epsilon, right? So if epsilon itself is present in the language of the grammar, then that will be removed, right? Because that won't have a derivation in the new grammar, but every other non-null terminal string will have a derivation. So, are there any questions from the last lecture? Okay, so let's continue then. So let's argue about this very carefully. So let's say that so G is the original grammar, which is the grammar which contains epsilon productions, and G prime is the new grammar, right? So this is the grammar that we have obtained by adding new productions, right? So we have still not gotten rid of the epsilon productions, but we have just added new productions. So in this, so in the last example, right? So this is the grammar G prime, right? So this is the grammar G, and then this is the grammar G prime, right, which contains all of the original productions involving the epsilon, so including the epsilon productions, but it also contains new productions, right? So then we can say that the language L of G, right, is going to be a subset of L of G prime. Why is that? So any string that is that can be derived, yeah. So Sanjit is saying that productions added can generate new strings, but the previous always remain. So that is correct, right? So we have just added more production rules. Right? So all the original production rules are still present. And therefore, if you have a string that can be derived using the original production rules, then that can still be derived using the same original production rules in the new grammar. So that's why L of G is a subset of L of G. So this is trivial. So all productions in G are also in G prime. However, you can also say the same thing in the other direction. So Vinit is asking that we have removed some production. So that's why I said to be very careful. Right? So we have not yet removed any production rules. Right? So this G prime is the new grammar, which contains all the original production rules and this new production rules that we have added. Right? So we have not yet removed the epsilon production rules. Okay, I hope that's clear. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we can also say the same thing about the other direction, right? Which is that L of G prime is also a subset of L of G, which means that any string that you can derive using the production rules of G prime, you can also derive using the production rules of G. So why is that? So the new production rules that we have added in G prime, they only correspond to making those nullable non-terminals null, right, in advance. So we basically remove the nullable non-terminals in advance. Okay, so we need to think that all the productions by the new rules were already there. You mean all the derivations by the new rules? Okay, but that's not true, right? So because we have added new production rules, right? So there could be a derivation which uses a new production rule, which uses a production rule that is present in G prime, but that is not present in G. So in that case, right, it will be a derivation that is possible only in G prime, right? It's not possible in G. See, if you have a derivation which uses the production rules of G prime, which means that which uses a production rule which is present in G prime, but which is not present in G, then can we construct another derivation which only uses the production rules in G? Okay, so Kostab is saying that corresponding to each production rule in G prime, we can follow the production rule in G and then terminate each non-terminal not used at epsilon. Okay, so I think so the general idea is mostly correct, right? So what we can do, right, is that so in the production rules, so if you have a derivation which uses the production rule of G prime, uh, which means that which is basically going to convert this nullable non-terminal into null in advance, right? So we can basically expand that in two steps, right? So we can first produce that nullable non-terminal. That particular production rule will be present in G, right? And then we can use the epsilon production which is present in G in order to get rid of that non-terminal. So what I'm saying, right, is that so we know that if you have a production rule, let's say A generates say some alpha 1 b alpha 2. So let's say that this was the original production rule that was present in G, and if B was nullable, right, then you will create a production rule of the form A generates alpha 1 alpha 2 in G prime. So now if you have a derivation which involves so let's say that some for some beta 1 beta 2, right, then I use this production rule, right, uh, so that I then generate beta 1 alpha 1 alpha 2 and then beta 2. Uh, so this particular derivation step is only possible in G prime, right? It's not possible in G, but then there must have been a production or a derivation of the form B generates epsilon, right, in G as well. So I can then basically convert this particular derivation step into a series of derivation steps. So I can say that beta 1 a beta 2, which in turn is going to generate beta 1 alpha 1 b alpha 2 and then beta 2. Right? And then in a series of derivation steps, this will give me beta 1, alpha 2, and then beta 2. So which means that corresponding to any derivation in the original, in the new grammar, right, G prime, I can get a derivation which may be slightly longer in the original grammar. So that's why all the strings that I can derive, including epsilon, right, using the in the new grammar, can also be derived in the old grammar. So so that's the reason, right? So for any derivation which uses the new production rules, there also exists a derivation with the old rules, which will use epsilon productions. So we have established that this L of G is equal to L of G prime. But what we want to do, right, is that we want to get rid of all the epsilon productions. So that's what we will do then. So from this G prime, we can safely remove epsilon productions to obtain a new grammar which we call as G hat, such that this language of G hat is the same as language of G prime minus epsilon. So it doesn't contain epsilon, but every other string is present. So we know that L of G prime is equal to L of G. So this means that L of G hat is also equal to L of G minus epsilon. So once again, right, so G is the original grammar. G prime is the new grammar which contains more productions, but it doesn't remove any productions. And then G hat is the grammar that's obtained by removing only the epsilon productions from G prime. And we have seen that language of G is equal to language of G prime, and we will now show that language of G hat is equal to language of G prime minus the epsilon. So that will prove that the language of this G hat is equal to language of G minus epsilon. So in order to show this, we will use a very simple strategy, right? Which is that I will show that the smallest derivation of a non-null string in G prime does not involve epsilon productions. So once again, right, so we will take some non-null string which is present in the language of G prime, and we will consider the smallest derivation of such a non-null string. And we'll show that the smallest derivation can never contain epsilon productions, which means that every non-null string is going to have a derivation which doesn't use epsilon productions, which means I can safely remove the epsilon productions and make sure that all the non-null strings remain in the language of the grammar. So that's why we will show that the smallest derivation of a non-null string does not involve epsilon production, and we will prove this by contradiction, which means that so we will assume that the smallest derivation of a non-null string contains an epsilon production, and then we'll show that, but if it does contain epsilon production, then it cannot be the smallest. Thus, that you can obtain an even smaller derivation of the same string in G prime, which will not involve that particular epsilon production. Okay. So is the proof strategy clear to everyone? Any questions? Okay. Okay, so let's prove that the derivation of the smallest derivation, right, of a non-null string in G prime will not involve epsilon productions, right? So let's say that in G prime, right, we have some derivation beginning from the start symbol of this non-null string W, and we also say, and let's assume that this particular derivation involves epsilon production, right? Which means that so at some point, right, you're using an epsilon production. So let's say that beginning from S, right, you reach some particular sentential form, let's say alpha 1 a alpha 2, and then I use an epsilon production here. So I get alpha 1 alpha 2, and then from there I derive W. Okay. So we want to show that we want to show a contradiction, right? Which means that let's say that this is the smallest derivation of W, and we want to show that I can construct an even smaller derivation, right? Where I will not have to use this particular epsilon production. So any suggestions for how we can do this? So consider that since we are using this epsilon production, right? So we are using this epsilon production A epsilon. So we must have added some other production. So we have to use this other production that we added, right? So that we don't have to use this epsilon production later. Yeah. So Sanchit is saying use alpha 1, alpha 2 rule directly. So So there is, so note that, I mean, we cannot, there is no rule which says that, uh, so we can't use any new production here, right? Because that's not the form of productions that we have added, right? So this particular step we cannot do anything, right? Because here A is, so from A, right, you're using this production rule, A generates epsilon. But what would have happened, right, is that A must have been introduced by some previous step in the derivation, right? And when we introduce A, right, at that point itself, you will say that we will use a new production rule, the added production rule, uh, which won't involve that A. Right? So we'll basically preactively or proactively rather convert A into null. Right? So which means that what I'm saying is that uh, so at some point, right, we must have generated A. So let's say that from S I generated some beta 1, B, and beta 2. Okay. And then I use this production rule. Let's say B generates gamma 1, A, gamma 2. And then beta 2. Right? So beta 1 and beta 2 are the same. I've just used the production rule. B generates gamma 1, A, gamma 2. Right? So, and then from this point, right, uh, in some number of steps, this beta 1 and gamma 1 and beta 2, gamma 2 were converted to alpha 1, A, alpha 2. Right? And then I used the epsilon production. Right? So alpha 1, alpha 2. And from there I got the word W. Right? So this is the same derivation, right? So all of these three derivations are the same, right? And just basically expanding uh, the steps that were involved in the derivation. So let's give some number as well, right? So let's say that it took m steps to go from S to this beta 1 p beta 2. And then we have just one step here, and let's say it took n steps to go from beta 1, this gamma 1 A, gamma 2, beta 2 to alpha 1 A, alpha 2. And then from alpha 1, alpha 2, it took k steps to go to W. Okay. So now, right here, since I have a production rule of the form B generates gamma 1 A, gamma 2, and since A is nullable, which means that there must be a production rule of the form B generates gamma 1, gamma 2. So that's what we said, right? So we'll take any subset of nullable symbols in the body of the production, and we will proactively convert those the non-terminals present in that particular subset to null. So or we'll simply eliminate those. Right? So that's the production rule that we're going to use. Right? So this is the production rule that we will use. So this means that I can. So at this point, right, I can. I can come up with this new derivation where I first generate beta 1 by beta 2, but then I remove this A itself. Right? So I get beta 1, gamma 2, and then beta 2. So this in n steps, right, which will give me alpha 1, alpha 2. And this in k steps will give me W. Right? So we are strictly using, so this derivation contains one lesser step. Right? So the number of steps here is one lesser than the number of steps in the original derivation, right? But it derives the same string double, right? So which means that the original derivation, right, which used epsilon production cannot be the smallest derivation, right? Which means that the smallest derivation will not contain an epsilon production. So that's why we can remove the epsilon production safely. Okay. So any questions regarding this proof? So note that, so here, right, for example, so consider this sentential form, right, beta 1, gamma 1, A, gamma 2, beta 2, which contains this non-terminal A. Right? And here I have the same sentential form, except it doesn't contain A. Right? So I'm saying that in n steps, right, both of these will basically derive the same sentential form, right, except that it won't contain A. So this is a property of how we use production rules, right? In the sense that if you have a particular non-terminal, right, in the sentential form, then that particular non-terminal remains the same, right? All the other non-terminals basically operate independently of each other. So, for example, from beta 1, gamma 1, I can derive alpha 1, And similarly, from gamma to beta 2, I can derive alpha 2. But it doesn't, the presence of this A, right, doesn't interfere with any of those derivations. So this is a property that we will actually use many times in order to simplify the proofs. Okay. Right. So that basically completes the proof of how we can safely remove epsilon productions, and while making sure that the grammar, the language of the grammar remains the same, right? Except that it won't contain epsilon. Okay. So now let's. Okay. So Vinny is asking that does that property have a name? So which property? Okay, the independent production of non-terminal. Yeah, so I mean, I haven't come across a name of that particular, I mean, I haven't come across any particular name for that property, but I've seen it used many times, right? So I guess it's sort of evident from the definitions, right? So that's why it doesn't have a name. Okay. So let's move forward. So in our quest, right, to come up with this to convert a grammar to its Chomsky normal form, the next step, right, this is the last step that we will do. There is one more step of this, but so here we are going to get rid of unit productions. So what are unit productions? So unit production is a production where the right side, right, or the body of the production only consists of exactly one non-terminal. So the body of the production consists of exactly one non-terminal. Right? So for example, if you have a production of the form A generates B, where A and B are both non-terminals, so this is a unit production. Now, as it happens, right, you can also get rid of unit productions safely without actually changing the language of the grammar. Okay. So the unit productions can also be safely enabled. And so the basic idea is very straightforward, right? So if you are, so basically, if you have a series of unit productions, right, then consider some unit productions that you're using in the derivation of a string. Right? So you may actually perform a series of unit productions, but ultimately, right, you will have to use a non-unit production, right? Because unit productions don't really derive a terminal string. Right? In the sense that if you keep on using unit productions, you won't derive a terminal string. So ultimately, you would have to use a production rule which uses a non-unit whose body is not whose body of the production rule is non-unit. Right? So we can sort of eliminate all of those steps which used unit productions and directly pass forward to that particular step, right, that used non-unit production. So that's what this key idea is saying, that if you have a sequence of production rules, uh, right, or rather if you have a sequence of steps in the derivation, right, where you're just using unit productions. So if A derives B just by a series of unit productions, then eventually, right, from this B, you would have to use a non-unit production, let's say of the form B generates alpha, right, where alpha is not unit. So then we can directly add this production A generates alpha to the original set of production rules, and we can skip all of these unit productions. So that's what we will do, right? So before removing the unit productions, we will add other production rules, right? Just in the same way that we do it for removing epsilon productions. And this new production rules that have been added will ensure that any derivation of the original string, right, any derivation of a string using the production rules of the original grammar. Uh, so you can get a new derivation of the same string using the new the production rules of the new grammar as well. So once we know that, we can then drop all the unit productions. So similar to how we did this for epsilon productions, right? Uh, so there are two steps involved, right? So just like there, we have to find out all the nullable non-terminals. So here we have to find out all the pairs of non-terminals which are involved in this unit productions. So we find all the pairs of non-terminals A, B such that A derives B by a sequence of unit productions only. So, using a sequence of unit productions, I can derive B from A, and I'm going to find all such pairs A, comma B. So again, we can use a simple inductive strategy to do this, right? So surely, so A comma A is going to be such a pair because I can derive A from A. And then, so if we have found A comma B, and if B generates C is a unit production, then we also add the pair A comma C. So if we already know that I can derive B from A using unit productions, and if I have a unit production of the form P generates C, then I can also derive C from A only using unit productions. So that's why we add the pair A comma C as well. So in this way, we find out all of the pairs of non-terminals which are involved in derivations with unit productions. So as I said, right, so once we find out all of these pairs, right, so let's say that if we find out a pair A comma B, and if there is a production rule of the form P generates alpha, where alpha is not unit, then we will add the production rule A generates alpha. So this is the procedure that we follow, right? So we first find out all the pairs of non-terminals involved in unit productions, and then we add new production rules. So if there is a production rule form B generates alpha, then I'm going to add A generates alpha as well. So this way I'm going to generate a new grammar with more production rules than the original grammar. Okay, so if G is the original grammar and G prime is the new grammar with all the added productions. So at this point, I have just added productions. I have not yet removed the unit productions. So that's why L of G is equal to L of G prime. So again, I'm sort of skipping the steps that we took the last time. So you can prove that L of G is a subset of L of G prime and the other direction as well, right? That L of G prime is a subset of L of G. But the simple reason is that this G prime, right, is the grammar that's obtained by just adding productions, right? So that's why it doesn't actually affect the language of the grammar at all. And now we can sort of remove all the unit productions from G prime. So that's what we will do. So from G prime, I'm going to remove all the unit productions. However, I can again ensure that that I can safely do this, right, without actually changing the language of the grammar. So for this, we will show that if you take any word in G prime that's present in the language of G prime, and you consider the smallest derivation of that word, then it will not contain any unit productions. So which means that for any word in G prime, there always exists a derivation which does not contain any unit productions, and that's why I can safely remove or eliminate all the unit productions. So that won't change the language of the grammar. Okay. So again, we can prove this by contradiction. Okay. So which means that if we assume that the smallest derivation of a word in G prime contains unit productions, contains some unit production, then I can get rid of that unit production by basically using one of the newer production rules that I have added, right? And I can construct a smaller derivation. So that's why the smallest derivation will not contain any unit productions. So let's go through that particular step as well. Okay. So as usual, let's say that there is some derivation S derives W. So this is a derivation in the grammar G prime, and this derivation is using a unit production somewhere. So let's say that this S, right, in some number of steps, right, gives me alpha 1, A alpha 2, and I'm using a unit production here. Okay, so let's say that in the next step, that I'm using this unit production, A generates B, that I get alpha 1, B alpha 2, and then I derive W from here. So here in this derivation, I'm using a unit production. And I want to show that there exists another derivation of W which won't use this unit production. So any suggestions for how we can do this? Okay, so since B is a non-terminal, when it is saying that B is a non-terminal and it is not in W, because W is a terminal string, so therefore some of its production rule would have been used at some stage later. So there must have been some production rule which converted this B to uh, well, is which must have converted this B to some non-unit form, right? Because we can't just keep on using unit productions. Okay, yeah. So that's the general idea, right? So okay, so then what? So we can then do this proactively, right? So we can so instead of first converting from A to B, right, and then using some non-unit production rule for B, uh, I can use the newer production rule, right? So since there is a production rule, since there is a production rule, A generates B, uh, and if B generates some gamma, right, then A generates gamma is also going to be present, right? So I will directly use that. Okay, so let's do that again carefully, right? Uh, so I'm just expanding that particular motion, right? So in some number of steps, right, I will go to some, let's say beta 1, let's say x beta 2, okay, and then I will use a non-unit production. So let's say beta 1, some gamma beta 2, and then this will go to W. Right? So at this point, right, this alpha 1, so in this derivation steps, right, this alpha 1 goes to beta 1, and then from alpha 2 I derive beta 2, while this B, right, may change through some other production rules, right? Through some other unit production rules to X. So we can do this, right? This may happen. Right? So there may be other unit productions which involve B. Okay? But at some point, right, I must use a non-unit production, right? So this is the point where I'm using a non-unit production. So I have a production rule of the form X generates gamma, and from B, right, I can derive X only using a sequence of unit productions. So now, right, since uh, since A generates B in a unit production, and since B generates X using unit productions, while X generates gamma is a non-unit production, then there must be a production of the form A generates gamma, right? Because this is a newer production rule that we would have added, right? So that's what we will use, right? So from alpha 1 A alpha 2, instead of using A generates B, I'm going to use A generates gamma. So I have alpha 1, gamma alpha 2. And this one, right, is going to directly give me beta 1, gamma beta 2, which in turn will give me W. Right? So this particular derivation, right, has at least one fewer step, right, than the original derivation. Right? And this basically contradicts the fact that the original derivation was the smallest derivation. So that's why if you are using a derivation which contains unit production, then you can always get rid of that unit production using one of the newer rules that we've added. Okay. So, any questions regarding this proof? So once again, right, we're using this property that production rules are used on non-terminals are sort of operate independently. So you can get rid of some particular substring, that you can change a substring in a sentential form and it doesn't affect the derivations from the rest of the sentential form. Okay. So once again, right, so just to revise, right, so if G is the original grammar and G prime is the grammar with the added productions, so we have just shown that the smallest derivation of any word in G prime will not contain unit productions, so which means I can get rid of all the unit productions. So again, if G hat is the grammar that's obtained by removing all the unit productions from G prime, then this language of G prime is the same as the language of G hat. And we know that language of G prime is equal to the language of G. So this means that language of G hat is equal to the language of G. So we can remove all the unit productions without changing the language of the grammar. Okay. So now we can sort of summarize all of these steps, right, in the form of a theorem. So if L is a CFL, then there is a CFG for L minus epsilon, and its production rules has this form, has this property. Right? So this grammar has this property that it doesn't have any useless symbols. It has no epsilon productions and it has no unit productions. What this means is that every body, right, so the body of every production rule is either a single terminal, right, or it has a length greater than or equal to 2. So if you have a production rule, right, A generates alpha, right, then either this alpha is a single terminal or it is a string of terminals and non-terminals, but its length must be greater than or equal to 2. So this is because we have gotten rid of unit productions and we have gotten rid of epsilon productions as well. So we can still generate a single terminal, or we will generate a string of terminals and non-terminals with length greater than or equal to 2. So that's what the form of this grammar would be. So now we will further constrain this form. Uh, so again, right, so we can sort of come up with, so this is the proof of the theorem, right, that we can always come up with the CFG. So just use all of the steps that we have previously seen. So which means that if you are given any arbitrary grammar, right, uh, for the language L, right, then I'll first eliminate all the epsilon productions, then eliminate all the unit productions, then eliminate the variables or the normals that derive no terminal string, and then eliminate terminals which are not reachable from the start symbol. So if you follow all of these steps, then at the end you will obtain a grammar which obeys the rule, or which obeys the form as laid out by the previous theorem. And again, the steps must be followed, right? So for example, so as we saw right in the last lecture, that the steps 3 and 4, right, they cannot be switched. So you must first eliminate non-terminals that derive no terminal string, and then you must eliminate terminals that are not reachable from the start symbol. Right? So similarly, uh, here also, right? So you must first eliminate epsilon productions, because epsilon productions can create unit productions, or it can also create useless non-terminals. Uh, and once you eliminate epsilon productions, you may create unit productions or you may create useless variables. That's why you will then eliminate unit productions, right, and then eliminate the useless non-terminal. Okay. Uh, so as I said, right, so now we are going to further constrain the form of the grammar, right? So this is the Chomsky normal form. So we say that a context-free grammar is in Chomsky normal form if every production is of one of these two forms. So the two allowed forms of production rules are that the first is that A generates BC, which means that the body is just two variables, right, or two non-terminals. And the second is that A generates A, which is that the small a is a terminal, right? So the body is a single terminal. So either the body of the production rule can be a single terminal, or it can be just two non-terminals. Right? So, so these are the only two forms of production rules that are allowed. And again, right, so for every context-free language, there exists a grammar in the context-free form. There exists a grammar in the Chomsky normal form. So this is the theorem that if L is a CFL, then L minus epsilon has a context-free grammar in Chomsky normal form. So we have already seen, right, how to get rid of epsilon productions and how to get rid of unit productions, right? But that doesn't mean that every production rule is going to be in Chomsky normal form. Right? So we still have to do some more steps in order to bring the grammar into CNF, but we can do that. Right? So we'll see how we will do that. Right? But so is the statement of is the definition of CNF clear to everyone? Are there any questions? So Vinith is asking that what is meant by a single terminal? A single symbol of the alphabet, or can be multiple alphabets? So it's just a single symbol of the alphabet. So since we are saying a single terminal, so that's why there's just one symbol. It's not a string of terminals. Okay. Okay. So So let's see how we can bring a grammar in HCNF form. So the first step is what we've already done, right, which is to clean the grammar, which means to remove epsilon productions, unit productions, and uh, the useless non-terminals. Right? So after doing that, every production body is either going to be a single terminal or it's going to be of length at least 2. Okay. So now for every body that is not a single terminal, we are going to follow the step 2, right? Which means that so what do we do in step 2? So we are going to make this body which is not a single terminal all variables, all non-terminals. So in order to do this, for each terminal A, so this is a single symbol of the alphabet, the terminal A. We're going to create a new variable which we call we're going to create a new non-terminal which we denote by the symbol A subscript A, and we are also going to add this production A generates A. And then in every body of the production rule whose length is greater than or equal to 2, we are going to replace the small a by the capital A. So once again, right? So we have some production rules where the body is a single terminal. That's fine. So we don't touch those. But we have some production rules where the body is some string, right, of terminals and non-terminals whose length is greater than or equal to 2. Okay. So if such a body contains a terminal, then we are going to remove. We are basically going to convert it into a non-terminal. And the way to do this is by introducing this new variable. Okay, so let's illustrate this using an example. So let's say that I have a production of the form A generates B, C, D, E. So here the capitalized symbols, right, are all non-terminals, while the lowercase are all terminals. So this is not in Chomsky normal form because the Chomsky normal form says that the body should either be a single terminal or it should be or it should be two non-terminals, right? So the first step, we are going to convert these terminals into non-terminals. Right? And the way we do this is we will introduce two new non-terminals, right? So in this case, AC and AE, we will add this production rules, AC generates C and AE generates E. And then we will remove this particular production rule and we will add this new production rule. So B, AC, E, and then AE. Uh, so we have removed the original production rule and we have added these three new production rules, and we have also added two new non-terminals. Okay. So note that by doing all of this, right, we are not really changing the intent of this particular production rule, right? Means that so if you are using this production rule in some derivation, right, then you can use a sequence of production rules, right? Or rather, you can come up with a new derivation which uses the sequence of this newer production rules in order to get the same step. So yeah, so this is what it's saying, right? So we introduce new variables AC and AE, and then we add this new two production rules. And the important note is that for each such terminal, right, we create at most one non-terminal, and we use it everywhere. Okay? So which means that so if you have some other production rule, right? Let's say you have some production rule X generates uh, let's say Y C. Okay. So let's say if your production rule on X generates YC, then I'm not going to introduce another non-terminal for this C, which is the lowercase c. Right? So instead, I'm going to use the same non-terminal AC. So this will be converted to X generates YAC. So I'm going to introduce at most one non-terminal for every terminal symbol, and that is the non-terminal that I'm going to use everywhere. So every body, the production in the body of every production rule which contains that particular terminal C, I'm going to replace by the non-terminal AC. So at this point, right, we know that the body of every production rule is either a single terminal or it is going to be a string which only consists of non-terminals. So now we do the next step, right, which is to then convert this string of non-terminals, which can be arbitrarily long, into a string of just length 2. So we do that by basically breaking the body, the right hand side, which is longer than 2 into a chain of productions, right? So for example, right, so if you have this production rule, A generates B, C, D, E, then this is going to be replaced. So we will remove this and we will add a number of other production rules. Right? This will be A generates BF, F generates CG, and G generates DE. Okay. So we have basically broken down this particular production rule into a sequence of production rules. Right? So from A generates B, C, D, E. Okay? This will be removed, and then this will be replaced by A generates. So in this case, right, BF, and then F generates CG, and then G generates DE. Okay. And this F and G are newly introduced non-terminals, right, or newly introduced variables. So this F and G will never be used anywhere else. They will only be used in these three production rules. Okay. So again, right, we have basically preserved the intent of this production rule in the sense that if you have a derivation which uses this production rule, then I can come up with a newer derivation which is going to use this sequence of production rules, and it's going to get you the same sentential form. So in the new grammar, right, I can basically derive BCDE from A, right, using this sequence of newer production rules that we have added. And yeah, so importantly, once we choose to replace A by BF, right, then since this is the only production rule which involves F, the only thing that I can do is to continue to BCG and BCD. So that's why it's important to use a different variable, right, or different non-terminal whenever you are breaking down this larger bodies, right, into smaller bodies. So you must not reuse the non-terminals when you are breaking down the larger bodies into smaller bodies. So this is opposite of what you do when you are converting terminals to non-terminals. Right? So there you had to reuse the same non-terminal, right? But here you must use a different non-terminal every time you break up a larger body. So again, we can prove that taking these two steps, right, adding this newer production rules does not change the language of the grammar. Right? So it will produce a grammar whose language is the same as the previous grammar. Right? So again, the proofs are very similar to what we already saw earlier. Right? So they involve this talking about this length, the smallest derivation, right, which involves rather. So in this case, it will actually involve induction of the length of the derivations. I won't actually go through this proof. Right? So by doing all of these steps, you can finally get the grammar in the Chomsky normal form. Right? So again, so which means that you can always, so given some arbitrary grammar, right, given some arbitrary CFL, let's start with the CFL. So if you are given some arbitrary context-free language, then I can always assume that there exists a context-free grammar which is in Chomsky normal form, which means that all the production rules, their body is either a single terminal or it's two non-terminals. Right. So let's quickly work out this on this example. Okay. So this is the example for 0 and 1n. Right? So this is the grammar for 0 and 1n, where n is greater than or equal to 1. So this is not in Chomsky normal form because both of these production rules, right, are not obeying uh, the rules of Chomsky normal form. Right? It is that it should either be a single terminal or it should be a body of two non-terminals, right? A string of two non-terminals. So the first thing that we'll do is we will first introduce non-terminals for each of the terminals. Right? So let's introduce this A0 for 0 and A1 for A1 for 1. So once we do that, right, I can then rewrite this two production rules as S generates E0 as A1, and then S generates E0 A1. Okay. So now, so this is obeying the syntax of CNF. This is also obeying syntax of CNF. This is not. So we must further convert this. So we must break down this body. So we will introduce a new variable for that. So S generates, let's say, E0R, and then R generates Yes. Yeah. So now both of these new production rules also obey the syntax of CNF. So all the production rules that are marked by ticks, uh, these are the production rules corresponding to the grammar in CNF, and its language is going to be the same, right? Which is the 0 and 1n, where n is greater than or equal to 1. So yes, so this is how you can basically convert any grammar to its CNF. So with that, I'll end the lecture today, and let's again meet tomorrow. So thank you, everyone.